Over. Dog. We need the snow to fly. We need cold weather and snow. We'll seal this deal. Hey guys, welcome back to DIY Retriever Training. I am Ryan Fortier with Long Hollow Outdoors. This week we're going to talk about the importance of continuing simple obedience all throughout early development. We're also going to walk you through 3 really important introductions for your puppy. One being the introduction to water, 2 being the introduction to live birds, and the introduction to gunner thrown marks. Okay guys, we are here in the field with Cannon. Little puppy, he's about 12 weeks old. Came to us via Llewellyn, Nebraska, thanks to Grant and Sherry Hatch of Big Cottonwood Retrievers. We got a pigeon here. We're just going to talk about the do's and don'ts of introducing a puppy to a bird. And guys, I can't stress enough how important birds are. If your dog doesn't like birds, then all of the rest of the training process is pointless. It really is about prey drive. The dog has to want birds in order to endure the rest of its life in training for the reason of hunting and retrieving birds. Introducing our young puppy to live birds, we're going to start with a pigeon, and we don't want the puppy to get startled, so we don't want it flapping its wings just yet. So what we're going to do, we also don't want it to fly away. So what we're going to do is cross the wings of the pigeon one time, and then cross them again. So that basically the elbow of this wing fits right into the pit of that wing, and the bird can't fly, can't flap its wings. And then all we're going to do is give it a nice little toss. You'll notice Cannon's dragging a lead rope so that I always have control. You know, some puppies might want to run off with it or do whatever. Just make sure you're prepared to train at all times. Cannon. Good puppy. Up, 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 up. Come on, up, 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 up. Hey, 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 hey. Good boy. Good boy. Just go to your lead rope. Never go to your puppy. Go right to the lead rope. Atta boy. Good dog. Good boy. Really man-headed kid. Good boy. Good boy. Okay. All right, we're going to jump right ahead. You know, make sure that you're always patient with your puppy. Some dogs are more comfortable in their skin than others. You'll hear me say that a lot. This particular puppy came to us, hopped off the plane, ready to go. He's very comfortable in his skin. We're not going to mess around with this phase too long. He obviously likes birds. We teased him around with feathers prior to this. I had a feeling that he was going to do very well. We threw his first live bird with the crossed wings. He retrieved it no problem. He's all about it. Now we're going to go, oh yes. Okay, if your puppy retrieves that bird with the wings crossed confidently and he's comfortable in his skin, he's ready for the next step. Just unfold those wings. Obviously we don't want it to fly away, so we're going to pull its flight feathers. The flight feathers are just the last half. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just pull those feathers out. Let the puppy play with them if you want, just like that. Now the bird can flap real strong and confidently and try to get away from the puppy, but it can't fly. Again, we're preparing ourselves for the future. Obviously we want the dog to like birds, but we're also preparing him for the gun breaking process. Cannon. You can move your feet too if you want to get closer. I wouldn't mess with zooming. It's important to note the order of things that we do. The very first thing we're going to do is introduce him to a bird prior to introducing him to water retrieving. If your weather's warm enough and your puppy's old enough and he's done a lot of retrieving and he seems to have a lot of drive and he's a very hot retriever even without having seen birds before, you could introduce him to water other ways. But what we like to do is at a very young age make that connection or that relationship between jumping in the water and getting a bird. If your puppy is bred well, for 100 years of breeding, the thing that your young retriever wants the most is a bird. So if we can make that connection between jumping in the water and getting a bird, then we're going to have the highest chance of creating a positive attitude about the water. Now you'll see with our youngster Cannon, we started this process fairly early in the spring. The water was still a little bit cold, but Cannon showed us a lot of upside in his drive to retrieve, his desire for birds, and as well as the way he handled new introductions. So we actually went ahead and introduced him to water retrieving on the very same day that we introduced him to birds, and everything went really well. We kept our session short and we left him wanting more, and he's progressing very nicely. You'll notice that we pulled the flight feathers out of the pigeon, and we did plenty of introduction and retrieving of the bird on land to get him all ramped up in desire and making sure that he wanted nothing more than to retrieve that bird before we ever threw it in the water and let him chase it for the first time on his swim. Now remember, all throughout this introduction process, and we'll talk about it more through gun breaking, any time that the puppy is hesitant or shows some kind of sign of being uncomfortable with whatever introductions you're trying to introduce, make sure that your ego doesn't get in the way and that you're willing to step backwards if need be on any given day of training. Sometimes training can be 3 steps forward and 5 steps back. It'll be that way throughout your dog's life and throughout your training process. Don't let it discourage you. It's just the way that it goes. Sometimes if a puppy has a bad day or you see anything that is questionable, make sure you back up to the step where the puppy was comfortable and do that for a day or two before you try to move forward again. And I'll reiterate, like we talked about in our last video, about developing a puppy that is comfortable in his skin. If you're doing the right things to introduce your puppy to the world around him, and he's developing and growing into a puppy that is confident, then most of these introductions will be very simple for you. Also, it's important to remember that we're not going to stay in these phases too long. We're not going to give the dog a steady diet of birds day in and day out. This is just simply an introduction to know what kind of puppy we have and to move forward. We're going to use them to introduce the dog to birds and to begin that process of developing the instincts the dog has. However, we don't want our puppy to develop a preference for birds. We want to develop his retrieving instincts for bumpers and have a good attitude about training no matter what he's retrieving. If it's not fun enough for you to throw bumpers and you're having too much fun watching your young dog chase birds, you could develop a youngster that has a preference for birds and then all of a sudden doesn't want to train with bumpers, which can make training very difficult in the long run. So hopefully back home and in the yard you've been doing a lot of bumper retrieving, retrieving in the hallway, whatever it is. Your puppy's instincts to just want to retrieve no matter what it is are developing, and you have a puppy that's comfortable in his skin. Now we have him introduced to birds, we have him introduced to the water. Simple obedience is consistently taking place throughout the week, and your puppy's doing a good job with that. The next step is going to now be to introduce him to gunner thrown marks. What that is having an assistant or something or somebody out in the field, out in front of the dog to throw the marks, as opposed to you throwing them with your hand from the line. No matter if your dog's going to run field trials or just do hunt tests or just be a hunting dog, it's important that your dogs start to retrieve longer marks, as well as learn that the birds and bumpers are going to be thrown or shot out in front of the dog, as opposed to always coming out of your hand from the line. So here you'll see Blake and a young black lab male named Bo help us illustrate what gunner thrown marks are. I also want to take this time to really stress the importance of developing your young puppy's eyesight as opposed to his instinct to just use his nose all the time. It's important that your young dog really learn to trust his eyesight, see where the object fell and run to that spot, as opposed to breaking down early and trying to utilize its nose to smell whatever object it's retrieving. Ultimately, we do want our dogs in the long run to use their noses, and that's an important tool. But if we develop that too much at a young age, it will get in the way of your youngster learning to trust his eyes and be a good marker and run straight lines all the way to the spot. So what we do is, when they're young, is use a lot of white objects. Might throw a lot of marks in fields with low cut grass, like a football field or baseball field or whatever you have. But make sure that you know, at least halfway to the object, the puppy can look out and see it, so it learns to continue to trust its eyes and run all the way to the spot, as opposed to not being able to see it, which is going to cause him to want to stop running and utilize his nose. The ultimate goal in developing a good marking dog is having one that trusts what it saw and running all the way to the spot and then breaking down and using its nose to finish the hunt. So don't be afraid right from the beginning to make sure that you're throwing objects your puppy can see and that you're not challenging him too hard as far as the final hunt goes. You can develop a puppy that runs pretty long marks, pretty long lines at a very young age, utilizing its eyesight and not worrying too much about the development of its nose that will come as it gets older. I want to encourage you all to be very open-minded and realize that there are many ways to skin a cat. There are many ways to train a dog. There are exceptions to every rule. I encourage you to be creative. There's lots of different ways, depending on the time of year and what resources you have, to introduce a dog to birds and to introduce a dog to water. The way that we do it is a way that was developed over the years. Being a pro and having lots of dogs to train in one day is a lot different than just having one puppy at home to train, like most of you out there. So I do realize that you may not have some of the resources we have, but you may also have resources that we don't have. So be creative, have fun with it, get out, introduce your dog to a bird at a very young age. Make sure he likes birds, make sure he's confident chasing down a cripple, and utilize that instinct to want to chase birds, to introduce him to the water, and introduce him to other things he may be uncomfortable with. So anyway, these are just some tips that we use. We like to introduce our puppy to birds around 8 weeks of age, sometimes very young. But anywhere in that time frame, when the puppy's about 2 months of age to about 4 months of age, is a good time for these introductions, introducing them to birds, getting them swimming, and introducing gunner thrown marks, and really just laying the ground floor for what's to come. Because from about 4 months to 6 months, depending on where your dog is at, is when we're going to start the gun breaking process and get ready for force fetch and a lot of other serious training. So we'll see you next time, and in video 3 we're going to emphasize the do's and don'ts of gun breaking and clear up some misconceptions about gun shyness.